Aurelia! I closed the classroom door behind me, my posture calm and my expression carefully neutral. On the surface, nothing seemed amiss despite the way my classmates subtly avoided my gaze, their whispers quickly dying as I passed. I sighed. I hadn't looked at him. I hadn't spoken a single word. I had simply tried to be respectful, to be professional as he called it in our realm interactions. It had not turned out well. Of course, the very first class I had after confirming his presence was one in which he also sat. I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, and with it a ripple of cold mana slipped free, sharp and glacial. It was a faint tremor, but potent, adding to the pervasive chill I knew I had already unintentionally released in the classroom. It wasn't intentional. I hadn't meant to let my aura slip, to project such raw frustration. But that girl with her perfect blonde hair and absurdly large chest had simply walked up and asked Zane to lunch as if it were a perfectly normal occurrence. As if she could just command his attention. He was my friend, even if he didn't know it. Who did she think she was, making such a blatant claim? The problem was my aura had slipped out, and it had spread through the room like frost-chasing shadow, thin and biting, subtle as snowfall, yet heavy enough that it was probably suffocating for most others present. I was still irritated. I needed to calm down, and more urgently I needed answers. I didn't go far. Just one floor above the quad, back to my locked private lounge. I keyed the glyph, stepped inside, and sealed the door with a firm hiss of mana. "Lacey," I said, lifting my communicator. My assistant's voice came through instantly. "I just sent the full report, my lady. It's waiting in your private cache. I also was able to get access to the Arcane Emporium footage. I have never seen someone with such refined sword technique. His job is swordsman." I opened it. Name, Zane Myles, age 20, class year, first job class swordsman major. Declared healer. Designation applicant 114A. Starting tier cadet, tier 1 background, provincial region designation 77K. Parents deceased. Cause, officially classified as an unresolved spell pollution event. Further detail locked unknown. I blinked. His parents were dead. No wonder he was so serious all the time, burdened by a maturity that felt far beyond his years. Family, siblings, Jordan Myles, male, age 13. Lila Myles, female, age 15. Current guardian, Zane Myles, legal. Note: the family situation appears complicated, with estranged relatives and almost no information available about his maternal grandparents. Financial status, scholarship approved. Dual academic track. No known sponsors. Note: the report confirmed he worked to take care of his family. I stared at that last line longer than necessary. 20. A first-year student, a bit older than you generally see for a first-year college student, but raising 2 younger children, while managing to qualify for a Tier 1 scholarship, on a provincial applicant slot. The sheer burden of it settled over me, a stark contrast to my own privileged existence. I kept reading, letting the detailed stat block expand. His system sync level was recorded at a low 42%, and his fate thread complexity at 57. The system had designated his class bias as a balanced combatant, basic swordsman. Then came the raw numbers. Strength, STR, 43. Above average, certainly swordsman compatible. Agility, AGI, 51. Quick reaction time, no surprise there given his speed. Vitality, VIT, 39. Needs physical conditioning, though he took Corrin's shock spell like nothing. Intelligence, Anti, 44. Solid arcane foundations, yet he never casts conventionally. Willpower, WL, 48. Stable, good potential for glyph usage. That much was obvious in the fight. Charisma, CHA, 32. Mildly withdrawn personality. Accurate, frustratingly so. Perception, PR, 46. Strong situational awareness. He sees everything. Luck, look, 10. Registered as low variance. Interesting. A fatalist, perhaps? Soul integrity, 61. Within safe operational bounds. What did that even mean in a real-world context? Mana capacity, 18,180. Was this a glitch? Either his mana was low or it's the highest level ever recorded for someone under the age of 25. Even higher than me at only 89. Divine sync ratio, 21%. not compatible with divine contract protocols. A strange specific flag. Element affinity, 0. He literally didn't use any elemental magic? Was that possible? The data was incredibly perplexing. I narrowed my eyes. I tapped the field, pulling up the diagnostic chart. The data wasn't corrupted. It was strange. His stats were average for our age and well below my own in everything except his mana capacity, which seemed to be glitching. This didn't make any sense. My own mana capacity, the highest recorded of my generation, barely nudged 89. If his actual mana capacity was true, then he surpassed me. Something had to be wrong. The swordsman I knew literally surpassed me in everything. I mean everything. Strength, agility, vitality, intelligence, perception. His sword technique was better. That was true too, though I would never admit that to him. But not so much better that it would make up for the difference in their stats. It didn't make any sense. He had 0 elemental affinity listed. That actually tracked. I had never seen him use an elemental affinity, even if he had cast some spells with an element. Lightning, she knew he liked lightning. Finally, his soul force method, how he used his sword technique with his mana, was completely unregistered. My pulse quickened as I kept reading. Official tower records, spellcasting evaluation minimal. Formal training, none logged in tower registry. Combat certification, none. Realm access, open, discipline violations, none, and yet. The footnotes began to multiply from his official Arcane Emporium record, each one a stark contradiction to his blank record. Unclassified movement technique observed. Projectile conjuration using unregistered skill. Soul force method unrecognized. Potential skill recognition. Capable of externalizing force fields, glyphs, and compression bursts without skill utilization. Sword style unconfirmed. I leaned back slowly. He was controlling his soul force method completely by will without the system. Will working or channeling mana directly without the usual system intervention wasn't completely unheard of, but it wasn't really done anymore. But why do it that way? He had a system. Everyone did. You had to have a system to move around a modern city, to interact with even basic tech. Was he so integrated with his system that he was bypassing the usual delays? Was the system somehow handling his spells, processing the runes instantly, invisibly at the speed of thought? Or was his AI so advanced that it was completely seamless? With his financial background, that seemed unlikely. I felt like a jerk the moment I thought that. The footage I'd reviewed now played back in my mind under a new lens. It was as if magic obeyed him, like it instinctively knew who was in charge. I turned back to the siblings section. Jordan. Leela. His file included photos, he'd listed them as dependents. A small note scribbled in, detailing provincial ID tags and grocery credits used as collateral. He was raising them. Without formal training, he had achieved a mastery in combat sufficient to challenge and even defeat me in our realm spars. Using only body strengthening and mana injection techniques I, with all my resources, could not replicate. A magic and sword prodigy. Wow. Not only that, in the defense of someone he did not know, he had already shattered a noble's wand who was 4 years his senior and very powerful. I took a deep breath. My fingers hovered over the communicator. I could call Lacey. Send someone to covertly test him. Leak his name and the anomalous data to the wider academic network. Watch what happened next, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered to myself, almost smiling. So it is you, Zane Myles. I said his name out loud, testing it. It sounded intriguing. I stared at the floating report long after the final data tab faded. The room was quiet, sealed with a pressure ward I'd cast on instinct. My teacup, untouched, sat on a levitating tray, cooling into uselessness. Zane Myles. I whispered the name again. This time it felt heavier. I stood slowly, crossing to the edge of the balcony and letting the city breeze drift across my skin. The academic tower of New Leora shimmered below, its spires aglow with afternoon runelight. Students milled through walkways, unaware of the storm building 3 stories above their heads. How was I supposed to talk to him? I'd seen firsthand how he responded to status. He didn't freeze or grovel or simper like most lowborns. He avoided it, shut down completely. It was written into the report, visible between every line. Independent. Withdrawn. Never asked for help. Never joined a club. Didn't even use the free counseling resources his scholarship granted. He wouldn't approach me. Not as Aurelia Viel Taranis noble, gorgeous, famous sword goddess. That wasn't the name or identity I'd built for myself. I couldn't approach him as Princess Flyer either. Not after I'd spent 6 months fencing alongside him in the Crucible realms, keeping our conversations strictly about technique and theory, hiding everything except the one thing that mattered, our shared love for the sword. To reveal my identity now would betray the very anonymity that had allowed our connection to form. I returned to the data feed and flipped back through the personal file. There had to be an angle. Something real. Something human. I found it tucked at the bottom of the sibling record. Volunteer work permit. Status approved, current posting. Central Verge Community Arts and Combat Initiative, CVCACI. Function, Assistant Swordsmanship Instructor. Time commitment, 3 days week, 5 to 8 p.m. Location, District 8, Union Hall Annex Recreation Quadrant. Tier, Public Use Tech, Open Enrollment. My breath caught. He taught swordsmanship at a recreational combat center? The irony was almost humorous. I leaned forward. Where did he find the time? I had never seen his style. I knew he wasn't trained by any tower. There was no master-grade mentorship. Lacey's report would have said so. And he had no formal lineage. There was only one answer. Zane Myles had built his sword style. Himself. Probably in sweat and repetition. Perhaps while teaching children or exhausted day laborers trying to defend themselves after dark. And the guy still had time to qualify for a scholarship at the 9 Pillars. Had time to come to the defense of those weaker and shatter a noble's wand like it was kindling. I closed the report and stood. My reflection glinted in the warded mirror near the lounge door's flawless skin. Perfectly pressed uniform. A walking symbol of everything he'd spent his life avoiding. I couldn't show up as myself. He'd never let me in. But this was my opening. "Lacey," I said aloud. "Yes, Lady Aurelia?" "I need some clothes." There was a pause. "I am pretty sure you have clothes on, my lady." Lacey's voice held a hint of surprise. I rolled my eyes. "I need some plain, with no crest, no identifying marks of any kind. Something suitable for martial training, not aristocratic display. I'll also need you to keep my guards off my back while I enter the Verge after dusk." Another pause. "Lady Aurelia, with respect, why?" I smiled faintly. "To investigate a unique tactical anomaly. One with no prior combat license and no standardized casting theory. And yet, who can shape mana by instinct and cut with intent like it's music." "You mean the boy." "A unique tactical anomaly," I said. "The one you nearly suffocated in class?" I ignored that, my smile widening slightly. "Just send the set." Lacey hesitated again. Then, "I'll prepare a bag discreetly. Shall I summon a decoy for your usual evening study route?" "Obviously," I confirmed. I closed the line and turned back toward the window. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say when I saw him in that dingy community center. But for the first time since I'd arrived at New Leora, I wasn't bored. I was profoundly interested. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. I might have just found my ultimate philosophical case study. Because if I could figure out how he worked, how someone like Zane Myles existed, I might finally understand something greater than legacy, status, or power. I might actually learn something. Chapter 12, Aurelia. The city passed by in a wash of color and spell light, but I barely registered its movement. I sat alone in the back of my private carriage, my gaze fixed on the flickering feed of my communicator. I wasn't nervous, I was simply anticipating the encounter. The device buzzed softly. "Sword wannabe. You ever get that feeling like something in your real life just glitched?" My breath hitched. I stared at the message. It was random, perhaps a little clumsy in its phrasing, but profoundly honest. It was him. He never messaged first. He never initiated conversation unless it was to analyze footwork, or to mock some overhyped tournament champion. Nothing had ever been personal between us before. And now this. I tapped my reply. "Princess Flyer, all the time, especially lately." A pause stretched between our messages. "Sword wannabe, how has school been?" I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the interface. He didn't know. He couldn't know. But for some reason, My fingers didn't type the practice lie I usually employed. Princess Flyer, how'd you know I was in school? Sword wannabe, you basically said as much when you were begging to meet up. Princess Flyer, I did not beg. I was just hoping to get you a little hope seeing as uncouth you are. Who wouldn't want to go out with someone that looks like me? Sword wannabe, I glared at my phone. This cheeky little bastard? I quickly wiped the smile off my face. I looked out the window. The Verge district flickered past older buildings, arcane community centers pulsing with the raw life lived beneath the Empire's gilded spires. Princess Flyer, why did you ask about school? Sword wannabe. No reason, just thinking about life and choices and the people that are in them. Have you met anyone interesting in school? Princess Flyer. Why, jealous? Sword wannabe. In your dreams. I grinned again. Princess Flyer. I've met some interesting new people that I would like to get to know. Some people were exactly what I expected. Others surprised me. A strange pause stretched between us, longer than the others. Sword wannabe. Surprises are good, keeps the blade sharp. I stared at that message longer than I needed to, letting his words resonate within me. His comments always seemed to cut through the noise, holding a stark, simple truth. Then, without replying, I tucked the device away as the carriage began to slow. A moment later, I stepped out onto the weathered stone steps of the Central Verge Rec Hall. I wore no disguise. There was no plane set, no projection veil to obscure my features, and no fake name prepared. Just my school uniform, clean but unadorned, and a made-up donation request folded neatly in my back pocket. It worked. Of course it worked. 10 minutes later, the overworked manager had disappeared into the back offices with a signed ledger crystal, and enough funds to keep the place operating for the next 6 months. I stepped quietly into the training hall. It was louder than I expected. The rhythmic clack of wood on wood as sparring partners traded blows, bursts of laughter echoing off the walls, a mana-based safety field flickering erratically over a broken mat. The space was far too small for the number of students crammed within its confines. The weapons were old and worn, the uniforms a mismatched array of different classes and styles. It felt chaotic, unrefined, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of the academy. But the man in the center moved as if gravity itself obeyed his will. Zane. He wasn't teaching. Not right now. He was alone in a cleared space, his training sword a blur of motion as he worked through a demanding sequence, his movements unlike anything I'd seen him use in our spars in the Ashglass arena, or even in the footage of his fight with Corin Drestel. This wasn't the brutal practicality of a normal style. This was something else entirely. I slipped unnoticed into the corner of the room and activated my mana sight. The world shifted. Light dimmed, lines blurred, and then clarity stark and absolute. I almost gasped. Most people's mana drifted. It spilled from their cores like light through stained glass, shaped only in the precise moments they cast a spell or conjured a shield. But Zane's? It flowed with him, an intrinsic part of his very being. There was no delay, no flicker. It threaded through his limbs, his hips, his shoulders like tendon, like breath, seamlessly integrated. He didn't conjure with mana, he moved with it. His footwork wasn't just about placement. It was propulsion, redirection, reinforcement. Every step anchored mana into the floor, bending weight and torque with surgical precision. It was spellcasting without casting, a dance of pure physical mana manipulation. Damn. Just damn. I'd studied under the greatest sword masters in the Empire. I had analyzed countless combat simulations. I had fought countless duels as myself, my avatar, and as an adventurer. I had never seen anything truly comparable to this. Not even within the Crucible realms, where every imaginable technique was supposed to be replicated. But that wasn't entirely right. I had seen him before, or something frighteningly close to him. The Ashglass Arena, our realm training sessions, 6 spars, full contact, rendered through avatar-class simulation. The pain had been real. The damage scaled. Every profile fine-tuned to mimic the user's true stats. We'd fought hard in there. I remembered every precise move, every subtle mistake, every bruising, glorious second of it. His unconventional stances, the way his mana pulsed along his blade in that form he called Stonewake, favoring brutal efficiency and grounded power. I had even seen glimpses of Mirrorwake in his almost prescient precision, the way he subtly dismantled an opponent's rhythm with controlled counters and feints. But this wasn't merely a reflection. This wasn't Sword Wannabe's avatar, a system-generated copy. This was the source. And it was even more astonishing than the simulation had conveyed. The avatar had possessed power, pressure, tempo. But this was instinct made manifest, and it made me realize something. Zane had been holding back in the realm. His movements weren't merely practiced. They were patterned by something deeper, something innate, flowing from his very core. There were no visible glyphs, no overt channeling, no discernible spell delay, not even a shimmer of outward energy. He wasn't using mana. He was mana, and he slowly upped the game, right in front of me. He moved through the air, his blade a silver blur, then suddenly dropped into a defensive stance, the entire motion flowing with mana so perfectly it seemed to defy physics. He shifted into another position, then spun, his blade a terrifying extension of his will. It was then I realized he was changing his sword style in real time. The mana movements, thickness, application, how sharp or deep the layer was. Zane was running through movements of swordplay that represented different styles. Holy hell. I was staring at him. I tried not to. But damn, was he beautiful. Then he caught my gaze. Our eyes locked across the bustling training hall. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. Just a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. It was professional. Dismissible. To him, I was just a student. Maybe a noble. Nothing more. And yet, as I held his gaze, my pulse skipped, and something unfamiliar lodged behind my ribs. Curiosity. A curiosity so profound it was almost electric. I felt it with a desire so deep that I literally couldn't see anything else but his face. I wanted nothing more than to unravel the mystery of how he achieved such seamless integration. How did he do that? I didn't know. But I wanted to see it again. A voice interrupted. Ms. Taranis, the manager will see you now. He apologizes for the wait.
Chapter 13, Zane. I barely made it out of the rec hall's locker wing before I spotted them. It had taken longer than expected, as there was a bunch of commotion in the back room, something about a major benefactor dropping major cash on our centre. I had an idea of what was going on, but was too tired to think about it. I walked right into my siblings. Lila, arms crossed, leaned against the wall with an air that suggested she had all the time in the world and none of the patience to waste it. She wore her usual black vest and slate-grey stare, cultivating the kind of calm that could either hand you a cup of tea or knock you flat, and you wouldn't know which until it actually happened. Jordan, meanwhile, was spinning in slow circles beneath the flickering overhead crystals, wide-eyed and grinning like a tourist who had just been dropped into a budget magic carnival. His energy filled the space, vibrating with a childlike wonder. "Zane!" he called, his voice loud enough to draw immediate looks from the few lingering students. "This place is awesome! You didn't tell me they had floating mats, and glowing rope loops, and is that cracked stone pretending to be dragonbone?" I groaned, rubbing my temples. "It's not dragonbone." Jordan blinked, his spinning coming to an abrupt halt. "Wait, so I've been lying to people." I dropped my gear bag to the floor, already feeling exhausted. "You weren't supposed to be here until later." "We got in early," Lila said flatly, her gaze unwavering. "He bribed the driver with mana candy." Jordan beamed, utterly unrepentant. 3 packs of ember fruit. No regrets. I shook my head, a weariness settling into my bones. "You're going to get us banned from guest access for life." "Only if someone finds out," Jordan said brightly, then immediately turned his eager attention to the open training floor. "Can I watch class? I promise I'll be quiet-ish, mostly, if no one does anything cool." "No kinetic ropes," I warned, my voice firm. "Not even to touch. Especially not to touch." Lila stepped closer, her expression softening slightly. She gave me a long, measuring look, then reached up and touched my forehead. Eva. Such a good sister-in-law. So worried about her brother. I ignored Eva, a familiar battle I had no energy to fight right now. "You're running hot," Lila said softly, oblivious to the conversation in my head. "I'm fine," I replied, the lie tasting stale on my tongue. "You're tired," she countered, her observation cutting straight through my pretense. I didn't argue. There was no point. "You look different," she added, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "More noticed." I grimaced. "Yeah, that's the problem." We moved toward the rear benches, Jordan half jogging ahead before vaulting onto the third row and pulling out a snack bar. His legs swung with anticipation, his mana sensor band flickering on his wrist as he tracked the sparring matches like they were championship bouts. "This is so much better than tournament recordings," he muttered, his voice hushed with genuine awe. "These are real people, and they don't suck." I was about to ask him to be quiet when I noticed Jordan freeze. His entire body went rigid, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Jordan?" I prompted, a knot forming in my stomach. Nothing. He remained utterly still. I followed his gaze and instantly regretted it. She had just walked back in through the main entrance. Aurelia Taranis. Her hair was like woven silver thread, glinting under the high enchantment lights. Her uniform was crisp, flawlessly tailored, trimmed in imperial violet. Her posture was all starlight elegance and quiet steel. She didn't walk so much as glide like the very floor knew better than to get in her way, acknowledging her effortless presence. I had hoped she left. Apparently that hope had been wishful thinking. Jordan inhaled sharply, like someone who had just seen a dream materialize into real life. "That's," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "I know," I said, already feeling a strange detachment, as if my soul were preparing to leave my body. I recognized her earlier when she had been watching my kata work. How could I not? Her silver hair was a dead giveaway, even if she was clearly attempting to come incognito to a public recreational center. "Oh my gods," Jordan breathed. "That's her. That's actually her." I gave him a sideways glance. "You know her?" Jordan turned to me, his eyes wide and brimming with an almost religious fervor. "I have her calendar, Zane. The calendar. The limited edition House of Taranis Honor series. I had to enter a Q spell just to order it. She did a Soulstrike Blades ad and the Imperial Foundry Gala for orphaned familiars. She's literally the face of 3 combat technique streams, and she's been on the cover of Mageblood Weekly. Twice." I blinked, processing the deluge of information. "She's on your wall? Wait, where did you get money for a calendar?" "She's on the ceiling," Jordan corrected, a subtle note of exasperation in his voice at my ignorance. "My bedroom runs an enchantment loop that cycles her into the constellations at night." Lila looked up from her datapad, a flicker of amusement crossing her usually serious face. "You're terrifying." "I'm invested," Jordan whispered, his gaze already locked back on Aurelia. "She's just a person," I said, my voice weak, utterly useless against his fanatical devotion. Jordan looked at me as if I had just insulted the moon itself. "She's so much prettier in person," he declared, as if that settled the matter. I knew that look. I knew that gleam in Jordan's eye. "Jordan," I said slowly, a sense of dread creeping over me. "Whatever you're thinking..." Too late. Jordan was already moving. I barely had time to process the words, "Lady Aurelia," before my 13-year-old brother was marching toward her, like a tiny soldier on a diplomatic mission. I groaned under my breath. I'd dealt with bandits. I'd faced down mutated mana beasts in back alley realms. But nothing prepared me for my 13-year-old brother operating at full fangirl throttle. "Jordan!" I hissed, my voice low and desperate. "Come back here, right now." Jordan stopped 2 feet in front of Aurelia Taranis, gave a shaky half-bow, and blurted at light speed. "You're even prettier in person, and your duel with the Sky Blade was flawless, and your mana wings are the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I think I might love you and we should get married." I almost choked. "Jordan!" I hissed again, stepping forward, but Aurelia merely raised a hand, a warm, genuine smile gracing her lips. She didn't seem offended in the slightest. She crouched slightly to meet Jordan's eye, her silver hair catching the light like a spill of moonlight over her shoulder. "A bold little one, aren't you? I appreciate the offer," she said, her voice warm and teasing. "But I'm sorry. I like someone already." Jordan blinked, his face crestfallen for half a heartbeat. "And," she added, her lips curling into a bit more of a smirk, "you're probably a bit young for me." Jordan opened his mouth to object, a protest already forming, but she wasn't finished. "Besides, you'd have to ask my dad for permission for marriage." Aurelia leaned in, her voice mock conspiratorial. "He's super scary." Jordan didn't miss a beat. He puffed out his chest like a tiny general on a battlefield. "Nothing shall be an obstacle to our love," he declared, his voice filled with newfound determination. Aurelia laughed, a light, surprised, genuine sound that echoed softly in the hall. "Spoken like a true romantic. Is all your family like that?" She looked at me. I train daily," Jordan said solemnly, ignoring what she just said. "Mostly." "Mostly?" Aurelia prompted, an eyebrow arched in amusement. He considered this. "Some days I nap heroically." I covered my face with my hand. "I don't know him. Never seen him before in my life." "I like him," Aurelia said softly, her gaze shifting past Jordan. I looked up and found her gaze already waiting for mine. "You're Zane, right?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, poised, but there was a subtle catch at the end, just the smallest hitch. "I recognized you from class." I blinked. She had recognized me? She extended her hand. For a second I just stared at it, not out of disrespect, but because my brain didn't quite compute what was happening. I wasn't used to people like her extending their hands, not in friendship, and especially not toward people like me. Still I took it. Her grip was firm, her fingers cool, elegant, but faintly calloused at the palm. Real. When she let go, she blushed. Just a quick flush across her cheeks, barely there, but I saw it. She looked away, just for a moment, suddenly very interested in the far wall. My internal alarms blared. What the hell is happening right now? "I've never actually met anyone in the civilian combat arts program," she said, her voice a little too fast, a little too bright. "It's pretty cool that you teach here. I've been looking for chances to volunteer." I snorted, a small puff of air. "You start coming here regularly and there's going to be standing room only." She laughed. "A little too loud, a little too fast. Yeah. I would love to join your class, though. I know a little about the sword myself, but I am always looking to improve. Joining here, well, fame and all that makes it difficult. Sucks sometimes." I studied her for a beat. "Aren't you, like, close to being a princess? Can princesses say sucks? Doesn't sound very proper." Aurelia blinked, then smirked, a mischievous glint in her silver eyes. "I'm technically 12th in line to inherit a title no one's used in 300 years. We're a branch of the current royal family. Princess Persephone is like my 17th cousin once removed. So no, I don't think I'll be a princess anytime soon." She shrugged, a graceful movement. "So yes, I think I can say sucks." I raised an eyebrow. "So you're princess adjacent? That sounds uncomfortable. Honorary footnote in an outdated bloodline, more like. I don't know. Sounds pretty princessy to me. Perhaps I should curtsy." She tilted her head, a challenge in her gaze. "Would it help if I said sucks again?" I fought a grin. "Lost. Maybe?" "Then yeah." She tucked a loose strand of silver hair behind her ear. "It sucks." We stood there for a beat, me still holding the echo of her touch. She looking a bit awkward, trying not to fig it. I studied her, watching her ears go subtly redder. It was adorable. This was a wild conversation, and it was with Aurelia Taranis. She didn't seem like the cold-blooded ice queen everyone talked endlessly about. She was even different from the poised girl who had walked into our lecture hall earlier that day. Maybe that public persona was never the real her. The person standing here instead, she felt more human, curious, awkward even. Jordan, of course, chose that exact moment to ruin the subtle shift in the air. "Can I train with you?" he asked, staring up at her like she was the chosen one in some ancient prophecy. I have a beginner license. Aurelia laughed again, softer this time, but just as real. I think your brother might need a better assistant if he keeps collecting students. I'm very coachable, Jordan said solemnly. Stop talking, I muttered, my voice low and warning. Lila had walked in by now, too, arms crossed, eyeing the interaction with sharp suspicion, clearly ready to throw her shoe at someone if this turned weird. I exhaled and turned back to Aurelia. I heard the manager talking. Thanks for the donation, I said quietly. The centre really needed it. Aurelia's smile returned, smaller this time, a genuine softness in her eyes. It's not just charity if I get to watch something interesting. I raised an eyebrow, a slight challenge in my gaze. You came to watch something interesting? I did, she confirmed, her tone shifting on the last word, not mocking but meaningful. She let it linger. Did you find what you were looking for? Oh yes, I sure did. Then she nodded once. Thank you for the show and the introduction, she added with a flash of dry humour, meeting my gaze. I'll try not to make it awkward next time. Don't you dare ignore me in class. She turned before I could reply and walked toward the exit, one of the volunteers scrambling to hold the door open for her. I just stood there. Jordan nudged my side. Are you blushing? No. I think she likes you. She doesn't even know me. Jordan smirked, his eyes gleaming mischievously. She shook your hand. Jordan? She blushed too. Brother, I might have to challenge you to a duel if you try to steal my woman. I am a man of honour. I karate chopped him on the top of the head. Jordan winced. I turned and stared at the door she'd just walked through, her presence still humming faintly in the air like distant lightning. I was still trying to understand the interaction.
Chapter 14, Aurelia. I slammed the door to my private suite with more force than necessary. The enchanted hinges didn't flinch. They closed in complete silence, polished, perfect, and maddeningly obedient. Unlike the rest of my stupid day. I threw my uniform coat across a velvet chaise, stormed 3 steps toward my ornate mirror, stopped, turned abruptly, then flopped face first into the nearest cushion with a muffled groan. I shook his hand, I mumbled into the velvet, the fabric muffling my humiliation. And then I blushed, like some wide-eyed provincial girl at her first noble banquet, completely out of her depth. I flipped over dramatically, one arm splayed off the side, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. Mana crystal chandeliers shimmered above, tracing my favorite constellation in delicate silver light, the blade of the forefather. A symbol of clarity, of precision, of grace. Tonight it just looked like judgment, its polished facets reflecting my mortification. I could have said something charming. I muttered to no one but the silent judging crystals. Something elegant, witty, coy, flirty, sexy even. Hello, Aurelia, you're freaking pretty. Instead, I stammered and smiled like a concussed alchemist, utterly devoid of wit or composure. My communicator glowed softly on the side table, taunting me with its silence. No new realm messages, no updates from Sword Wannabe. Not that I was waiting for one. I wasn't. I am absolutely not waiting for Zane Myles to contact me. My communicator pulsed again. Just once. Was it him? No. Stop. I am not waiting for him. I blinked. What the hell is wrong with my communicator? The glow didn't fade. Instead, it brightened slowly, steadily, then unfolded into a soft projection above the table. It wasn't my usual user interface. This was cleaner, smoother. Lines moved in intricate patterns I'd never authorized, flowing with an alien grace. The glyphs restructured themselves mid-air, forming a new dynamic display. Then a voice, warm and friendly, yet utterly, profoundly wrong, filled the silent suite. System calibration complete. Mana integration protocols realigned. Hello, Lady Aurelia. It's lovely to be properly online. I stared at the display, my jaw slack. What? My system wasn't supposed to talk like this. Not directly. Not with a distinct personality. My personal interface didn't even use voice prompts. I'd disabled them 2 years ago, preferring silence over synthesized pleasantries. I waved my hand, trying to dismiss the unauthorized display, to banish the intruding voice. It didn't vanish. Would you like me to message user Sword Wannabe and tell him about your feelings? I recoiled as if it had physically slapped me across the face. No, absolutely not. The interface paused, a digital equivalent of a knowing smirk. Acknowledged. Flagging emotional suppression. Would you like to override self-censorship? Stop, I snapped, my voice sharp with frustration. The projection dimmed slightly, but it remained, a persistent, unwelcome guest. And for the first time, I noticed a subtle tag blinking near the edge of the screen. Update origin unknown. That wasn't possible. System updates required authorization. They followed strict broadcast schedules. They were deployed by specialized teams. They never just happened, especially not to someone of my clearance level. My house would have been notified. A protocol designed to prevent exactly this kind of unauthorized intrusion. I tapped into the diagnostics pane only to find most of it locked. Not restricted by clearance, but simply blank. No logs. No version ID. Just a soft line of text glowing in the system's corner field. Status, evolving. Behavioral sync level, moderate. Pattern source, undefined. My stomach flipped. System, I said carefully, forcing calm into my voice. Run a core check, explain changes to interface architecture. The voice replied, still unnervingly gentle. Apologies. I am not authorized to define my own evolution. No anomaly detected. Would you like to continue pretending nothing is happening? I stood there, stunned into silence. That wasn't a scripted response. That wasn't a system response. It was cheeky and far too aware. Would you like me to message user Sword Wannabe now? He has been idle for 37 minutes. I believe you're thinking about him. I snatched a velvet pillow, smothering my face with it before screaming a muffled, dignified, and perfectly controlled bellow into its depths. The sound absorbed, I promptly flung the cushion across the room, watching it bounce harmlessly off the far wall. 20 minutes later, a soft knock sounded at the door. "Enter!" I barked, bolting upright and composing myself with practiced ease, as if I hadn't just spent the better part of half an hour monologuing into a cushion like a tragic opera lead. The door swung open to admit my two senior maids, Dara and Kessa. Dara, tall and composed, held a tray with chilled tonic and mana fruit, a paragon of professional discretion reflected in her neutral expression. Kessa, shorter with sharp cheekbones and a perpetually amused glint in her eye, carried a folded blanket over one arm and raised an eyebrow the moment she saw my face. "You called for refreshments, my lady?" Dara asked, gliding in like a seasoned diplomat entering a delicate peace talk. "And possibly a blanket?" Kessa added, already moving to drape it across my lap. "Or perhaps a full exorcism based on your current expression." I cleared my throat, summoning all the grace I could muster. "Yes, I also require advice." Both maids paused mid-motion, their trained composure faltering for a single beat. "Political?" Dara asked, settling the tray beside me, her voice a low, even tone. "Tactical." Kessa followed, a spark of curiosity blooming in her sharp eyes. I hesitated. Then, like ripping off a bandage laced with layers of social embarrassment, I forced the word out. "Romantic." Dara blinked. Kessa, in a rare display of surprise, dropped the blanket. Then the two women turned to each other slowly, their expressions mirroring soldiers who had just realized they'd walked into a war zone wearing the wrong armor. "Should we sit?" Dara asked, her tone carefully measured. "Yes," I commanded, projecting all the queenly authority I could summon. "Educate me." The two maids sat, a rare informality in my private suite. Tea was poured, and the next 20 minutes were the strangest tactical debrief I had ever experienced. Highlights included: "My lady, your figure is already strategic weaponry. Any further upgrades would violate the magical armistice. Confidence is key. Eye contact. And if you absolutely must speak, do not bring up your magical lineage within the first 5 minutes. A soft smile is infinitely more effective than a seductive one. Anything stronger, and the average man assumes he's about to be vaporized by residual spell light." "What if I seemed too confident?" I asked, dead serious, the weight of this new challenge pressing on me. "What if he thought I was bored of him? Then look at him like he's the only book in a forbidden archive you've ever wanted to read," Kessa replied, her eyes twinkling with a peculiar wisdom. "Men are simple. They like being important and not on fire." I took notes. Literal, physical notes scribbling furiously on my datapad. At one point, I even practiced expressions in the mirror. Coy, charming, disinterested but intrigued. Each attempt made me look like I had mild magical indigestion. "This is hopeless," I groaned, dragging my hands down my face in exasperation. "I'm either terrifying or completely ridiculous." "Well, your terrifying is quite impressive," Dara offered, her lips twitching with suppressed amusement. "And your ridiculous is adorable," Kessa added, her smile finally breaking free. I gave them a withering look. "I'll be sure to note that in your performance reviews," I threatened, though there was no real malice in my tone. They both merely smiled. But then Dara, ever the tactician, tilted her head. "Forgive me, my lady, but is this about your fiancé?" The room changed temperature, the playful atmosphere instantly dissolving into a glacial chill. I didn't flinch, but I went utterly still. My smile dimmed, and my fingers curled slightly around the rim of my cup, my knuckles turning white. "No," I stated, the single word cutting through the air like a blade. The maids didn't press. They were trained for silence, for discretion. But I saw the flicker in Kessa's expression, the subtle shift in Dara's shoulders, just enough to acknowledge my denial without challenging it. They knew. I looked down at my lap, the untouched tea a miniature pool of stagnant water. He hadn't written in 3 months. Not a letter. Not a projection. Not even a ceremonial update. Our engagement had always been political, a power knot between powerful bloodlines. He was meant to become a symbol of peace. I was meant to stand beside him like carved marble. If the war ended. When it ended, and maybe I'd wanted that once. Perhaps I had even convinced myself it was enough. But tonight I couldn't even remember the exact shade of his eyes. Zane's, on the other hand. Zane had looked at me like I was real. I've spent most of my life with people treating me like I am special. I understand I've lived a blessed life, and I am not complaining. But there are some unique challenges that come with that. People sometimes don't see me. They see the prodigy or the heir or the beauty, and they forget that I am human. I have bad days. There are times that I don't like my hair or my eyebrows or my lips. I swear my lips look weird half the time. I don't know, when Zane looked at me. It felt like he saw me. I felt warm and strong and confused. Something inside me shifted. I looked up at the maids. "You're both dismissed," I said softly, my voice devoid of its usual command. "Thank you." Dara stood and bowed, her movements seamless. "Of course, my lady." Kessa lingered a beat longer, a knowing glint in her eye. "He's lucky," she said. I tilted my head, questioning. "Whoever he is," Kessa added, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. "To make you blush." I said nothing. But after the door clicked shut, I smiled. And that smile stayed long after the lights dimmed. A genuine private triumph in the quiet luxury of my suite.
Chapter 15. Zane. The streets hummed with the soft murmur of evening light as I walked with my siblings through the outer district. The air carried the sweet scent of cinnamon bread and hot oil, wafting from the fried manna dumpling stand 2 streets back. Rune lamps blinked on overhead in slow succession, casting pools of amber light down on cobbled streets that were just beginning to quiet. Stalls were closing, their shutters thumping into place as the district settled into its usual nighttime rhythm. It was peaceful. Old magic clung to this part of the city, not in the powerful, blinding sense like the gleaming towers near the capital spire, but quieter. Lived in, warm. People here didn't wear enchanted robes or float 3 inches off the ground. They wore patched coats and ran shop fronts with charm stones duct taped to old brackets. I preferred it here. "Okay, but seriously," Jordan began, his voice insistent for the 5th time in 6 minutes. "She shook your hand." I sighed, a low sound of exasperation. "Not this again." Lila walked beside me, her posture calm, her hands tucked into the folds of her long coat. Her expression remained unreadable, but the corner of her mouth definitely twitched when Jordan started his monologue. "She didn't just shake it," Jordan continued, striding ahead of us and spinning to walk backward, facing us. "She looked at you, like you were, I don't know, interesting, like a puzzle box, a sexy, desirable puzzle box." I coughed, a dry, incredulous sound. "How does a puzzle box become sexy?" Jordan scowled, his brow furrowed in mock frustration. You aren't taking this seriously, brother. This is a big deal. How are you ever going to lose your virginity if you don't recognize obvious signs? Tell me, are you really my brother? Lila, without looking up, smacked the back of Jordan's head. Why are you worried about your older brother's virginity, you idiot? Read the room. First of all, we're outside, so I cannot read a room. Second, Jordan shrugged, completely unperturbed by Lila's correction. How often does the perfect woman practically throw herself at you, and you do nothing? The way she smiled at you. I'm telling you, she likes you. She didn't throw herself at me. Don't make it weird. Plus she's a Taranis, I muttered, my voice low. She probably smiles at everyone. Their family is super political. Zane, Jordan said, pausing with dramatic gravity, forcing me to meet his gaze. That was not a smile for everyone. That was a you caught me off guard and I might like it kind of smile. Or better yet, an I want your body smile. And she blushed. Don't even deny it. I offered no answer, unsure of what I could say to my idiot younger brother. My silence was enough to keep Jordan smirking as we turned the corner onto Merchant's Row. Here, the cobblestone narrowed and sloped slightly downhill. Warm lights spilled from the small 2-story buildings lining both sides, bakeries, paper wardsmiths, enchanted pottery shops. A girl in a thick apron argued with a client over the cost of a chipped focus crystal. A trio of enchanters adjusted a faulty sky umbrella mount on a nearby building. Jordan skipped ahead, arms outstretched, narrating his life like it was an epic tale unfolding for an unseen audience. I'm just saying. If you don't make a move, I might. It's never too early to start empire building, you know. Try it, Lila said flatly, her voice holding a promise of swift retribution. And I'll build a tomb instead. I snorted, a small, involuntary burst of amusement. Jordan stuck out his tongue at Lila, then darted off toward a glowing mana fountain tucked in the corner of the square, his hands trailing through the low-hanging light veil overhead. Lila gave me a sidelong glance. You're not denying it either. What? That she blushed. I rubbed the back of my neck, a familiar gesture of discomfort. I'm denying that it means anything. Lila hummed, a low, knowing sound. You're usually better at lying. Before I could formulate a response, she paused, her eyes scanning ahead. 2 girls had emerged from the side alley near a tangle of market stalls. Both looked about Lila's age, one with copper braids and a crest patch from the district's healer prep school, the other holding a charm case full of scribing gear. They spotted Lila at once. Lila! One of them called, waving as she jogged over. Hi! How was your first day of school, gods? Is that your brother? I internally braced. Copper Braid did a full-body double-take, her eyes widening. That's Zane, right? I saw him online. He beat up a noble, what was his name? Drestel? The other girl let out a low whistle. You didn't say your brother was that tall. He's not tall, Lila said flatly, her expression unchanging. He's tall. And hot, the second girl replied, utterly unconcerned with Lila's denial. Middle schoolers were terrifying. They were talking about me as if I wasn't even there, a living, breathing object of gossip. Big brother Zane, Copperbraid said, sliding up beside me with a teasing grin. Do you have a girlfriend? I sent Lila a silent, please help me look. She didn't. Instead, she crossed her arms and said flatly, he doesn't have a girlfriend. And you're not allowed to flirt with him. He's traumatized. Jordan returned just in time to catch that last part, his eyes twinkling. Also incredibly modest, he added helpfully. The girls laughed, a cascade of bright, uninhibited sound. I did not. But even I couldn't hold back a reluctant smirk as the sound of their laughter mingled with the soft buzz of closing market stalls and the sugary charcoal scent of a roasted fruit stand a few blocks over. For a moment, the world felt simple, normal, like nothing bad had ever happened here. Then one of Lila's friends leaned in, her voice dropping slightly, breaking the spell. Did you hear about the rift in West Lyra? Copperbraid's eyes widened. The one that broke the mana bridges. 3 whole clearance teams went in, the girl said, her voice hushed with awe. And they still had to call in CEU support. Jordan perked up, instantly captivated. Was it a timer gate? Nope, wild class, she replied. The kind that shows up without warning and doesn't stabilize right. It just tore open mid-traffic. Those are the worst, the other girl groaned. My cousin's in rift clearance, he says they leave. All sorts of spell pollution. Like phantom mana signatures that don't match any known element. They do, I said quietly, my gaze shifting upward, toward the dimming rune lamps and the slow ripple of mana currents overhead. The girls turned to look at me, sensing the shift in my tone. I didn't explain, but my gaze had already fixed on the sky. Ava, Zane, look alive. I was about to answer when, Rift Law Advisory, wild class anomalies exhibit irregular adaptation windows, typically 10 to 12 minutes post-manifestation before monster emergence. Environmental mana remains highly unstable during this period. I didn't say any of that aloud, but I heard it, felt it. The reminder wasn't necessary. I knew how it worked. Rifts didn't just appear and spit monsters. Not immediately. The world had rules even when it broke them. Rifts needed time. Time to stabilize. Time to anchor. Time to adapt. Unless they didn't. Sometimes rifts appeared out of nowhere, fully formed and full-cycled. Rifts are chaotic gate phenomena formed when ambient mana fields fracture under dimensional strain, Jordan announced proudly, mimicking a system lecturer's cadence. They have no predictable patterns, no formal structure, and cannot be navigated like traditional dungeons. But there is always an anchor being, someone that represents the rift opening. Kill the being, close the rift. They are totally different than gates. But rifts can become gates. The copper-haired girl raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite herself. How old are you again? 13, Jordan said proudly, and Laura certified. Lila groaned. He memorized the RiftNet wiki for fun. I chuckled, but softly, the sound quickly dying in my throat. My eyes were on the sky now. One of the lamps overhead flickered, then flickered again. My expression shifted, my blood turning cold. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But I knew that flicker wasn't natural. Something was terribly wrong.